Oh, I'm shaking like a leaf. Nothing's easy in this country. That was a hike and a half, boy.
After enjoying a good whitetail guiding season, and with an entire week left to hunt, I was anxious to head out and try my own whitetail luck. But first, I had my most important client of the year to take out, my father-in-law, Ray Juna. Now earlier in the fall, Ray and I had teamed up to notch his mule deer tag on a pretty good-looking buck, and that hunt was one of my most enjoyable hunts in some time. And although it only took Ray one day to get the job done, there's more to that story coming right up. But first, let's see how one day Ray makes out on his whitetail hunt. With only one free evening to hunt, Ray was still looking to take a decent buck, and with only minutes of light left, not one decent buck showed up, but two. In the fading light, I looked both bucks over the best I could. Now, it was up to Ray.
Not the one?
That's the one.
Boy, Ray. Atta boy. What do you think?
Should be right through the heart.
So what just happened there, Ray?
Oh man, that was something. He come in from the south there, and I thought I was going to take off there for a minute when I first started to shoot at him. If I was going to shoot at him, but he come right up to us, and he was only about 50 yards away, I guess, and down he went. Man, that's the closest I've ever had one to come in. That was something. Oh, he looks pretty good. Nice dark brown in the antlers there, and yeah, he looks pretty good.
That's the first whitetail you've been out for in a few years, eh?
Yeah, it must be, had to be about 4 years now, 4 or 5 years, I guess, before I went out.
Does it feel good to get back at her?
Yeah, it feels good to shoot another deer.
That's good. You got to get back in practice, take your grandkids now.
I guess so.
Well, what do you say we go get the bike and
All right.
put some tags on this guy and get him home?
Okay, sounds good.
The Canadian Guide Life with Brad Fry is brought to you by Monarch Images, trail cameras that capture the action. Fort Muzzle Shell Outfitters, Montana's finest big game hunts. Buddy Ramp, the safe way to get loaded. Big Buck Magazine, Canada's #1 deer hunting publication. And by Fry's Canadian Outback Outfitters.
So let's go back about a month prior to Ray's whitetail hunt, down to southern Saskatchewan to see just how Ray's mule deer hunt turned out. And although it may not look like it, this hunt took place during the first few days in November. Certainly not typical Saskatchewan weather, but we weren't about to complain, because although it was unseasonably warm, the rut was in full swing, Ray had his rifle in his hand, and I had already been down during muzzleloader season, giving us a pretty good idea where to start. And as usual, it didn't take long to run into a few sheds, making the long hike that much more interesting. Eventually, we reached the heart of muley country, and with the rut on our side, the bucks are certainly on the move. The plan now was to keep the wind in our face, find a good lookout, and let our eyes do the walking.
Well, there was another one come from further back.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, there's two of them. That first one went into the bush, didn't it? The first one we seen in the opening?
Yeah, he's past the doe
Yeah.
and on the other side.
But there was another one come after him.
And there he was, good old Buddy. Now this was a buck I was all too familiar with. The very first time I had seen him was about a month earlier, when Dave Archer and I had spotted him early one afternoon. And although there's no question he was a good buck, it was Dave's first day out, and with high hopes of finding something even better, Dave reluctantly passed him up. And as it turned out, we never did see him again. That was until I was out again in the same area about a week later with good friend Kelly Curry. And as some of you may remember, as I'm sure Kelly does, Buddy definitely used up one of his 9 lives that day. For those of you that missed that episode, let's go back to Kelly's hunt to see what happened.
Hey, Kelly, he's 150. Do you see him there? Yeah, I got him here now. He's just gonna just wait till he comes up to that skyline. All right, and take a couple more steps. I think he's gonna come up there just by that bush there. Looks like I can see his body through the grass here now. Looks like he's coming.
Now, before you feel too bad for Kelly, you'll be happy to know that he ended up with a pretty good deer in the end. So, there he was again, this time 400 yards out with plenty of daylight left. And with all the history I had with him, I was more than ready to have another chance at him. But first, I had to make sure he was what Ray was looking for. And after closer inspection, it looked like he had snapped off one of his kickers on his left G2. Regardless, this guy still had it all in my books, and all I wanted to hear now was a go-ahead from Ray.
He's got good mass, got 3 stickers, good front forks. The only drawback is he's weak on his top forks, but he's an old-timer.
What do you think?
I think we should dump him.
Think so?
I think so.
Okay.
Drop plan on this side.
It's time now for another blast from the past. Here's Brad with today's vintage video.
Let's go back in time to the mid-1990s, to the remote Mackenzie Mountains of the Northwest Territories, on a classic 2-week-long horseback hunt for mountain caribou and one of my favorites, Dall sheep. After the mandatory handshakes and high fives, we had just finished taking pictures when out of nowhere came another herd over the hill. Now, mountain caribou are typically known for their mass and palmation, just like the one we had finished taking, but the bull now standing in front of us at the back of the herd easily had the longest top points I have ever seen by a good foot, if not more. And for those of you interested on how to score a caribou, well, let's just say that the top points weigh heavily on the final outcome, and as a result, there's no question we are now looking at a world-class bull. But all we could do now was sit back down and watch him browse around for a while before the entire herd simply wandered off like caribou always do. A few days later, when my hunter and I headed to the hills and teamed up with fellow guide Arnold Paiu and his hunter to do a little sheep hunting.
Got any words of wisdom, Arnold?
None. Except it's good traveling with the Indian.
Yeah.
I drank out of the wrong cup.
September 5th, back in the good old Canyon Creek. I spotted 50 ewes early on and found a band of 15 rams here. There's 3 possible shooters. One in there that's maybe 36, 37 on the long side. And there's one that I like. It's just to the nose, but he's rounded off a bit and pretty heavy. They're down nice and low. So we'll see what we can do here.
Voila! There you go.
Good shooting, Tex.
Well, we got a man. Nice and heavy. Wind off at about 9.5, I think. He's a good old sheep.
Yeah, excellent sheep. So here we were again, face to face with an old buck I had a little history with. He'd given us plenty of time to judge him, and even though it was Ray's first day out, he was definitely a buck we wanted to go after. So with plenty of daylight left and with the wind in our favor, when he made that first move and headed for the open fields, we slipped in behind him, and the hunt was on. With the old buck now focused on Blake running the camera from a safe distance, we were able to drop out of sight and close the gap.
Oh boy. What do you think?
I don't know yet.
That was pretty good, eh?
Yeah?
Whew.
Sure stood there a long time, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm shaking like a leaf.
After the shot, the buck had instantly disappeared behind a ridge, and by the time we made it over there, he was nowhere to be found. Then, off in the distance, I thought I spotted him walking away. So not wanting to push him, if in fact it was Ray's buck, we simply slipped out of there to wait for morning. After a sleepless night, we were back on his trail, first thing the next morning.
We're just gonna start back at the basics and see if we can pick up a blood trail, and hopefully we can find this guy. So, away we go.
Go get him.
Back at the scene, things weren't looking good. That was until Blake, with camera in hand, came across a suspicious-looking track in the opposite direction that we had thought he had went. Minutes later, and a blood trail was found.
thanks guys. Pretty good. Pretty good.
What do you think?
Oh, it's the best one I've ever got.
Well, it was a bit of a show with them, but we
Yeah.
got them.
It was some work to get them, and the work was all worthwhile.
That was pretty good, eh?
Yeah? Oh, I'm shaking like a leaf.
Next week on the Canadian Guide Life.
Next week, we're heading a little further south, just across the border to the good old state of Montana, where I've had a lifelong jinx. Now, antelope are the name of the game next week, and over the course of a 2-year period, we cover a handful of different hunts with the bow, rifle, and muzzleloader. And along the way, we deal with a little weather adversity, run into a few other critters, and test our patience sitting at water holes and at open country spot and stalking.